Finance Committee. We have joint participation in person and via Zoom, so we will be doing everything via roll call. So to call to order on Zoom, and we might have some folks joining later. By the way, we have Heather McHugh and Nick Rue, and in the room we have Greg Marr, Angelina, we have Kyle and Victoria. Okay, awesome. So today we are going to review a couple of budgets. We'll go through the cable TV budget, and then we have our guests from the Blackstone Valley Tech here with us, and then we'll go through a couple of conversations about, I think, what's on the top of everyone's minds, and that's where we're at for this particular budget season. So without further ado, then, Bob, if you'd like to come forward and review the cable TV budget with us.
Good evening, Bob DeToma, Department Head for Grafton TV. The budget is going to be level funded from one year to the next. The only changes anticipated are going to be to the payroll, which will be overseen by Mary and Evan.
And this looks like pretty much the same budget we've had for the last 3 or 4 years.
Correct.
On that.
Yep. The salary lines actually didn't change because we do calculate in overtime and all the rest of the stuff that goes on to run the studio. And we have been under that for the last 3 years. So we're going to just leave it where it is. It's working fine. And anything that is surplus obviously rolls right back to the PEG access account. So then we just reappropriate it the next year.
So this is town paid funding, not paid out of PEG. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
You already had the opportunity to meet with one or two of us individually as well, right? Did one person from the Finance Committee have a chance to already speak with you, or is this your first opportunity to stand in front of us?
This is the first conversation I've had with Finance Committee.
Oh, well.
Unless you count when I run into Mr. Haddad at market, at the store.
We won't count that. That won't be on your official ledger. Okay, this is a very simple one. Obviously level funded. I don't have any questions.
I'm good.
Same.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
The buffet is only served on the weekends, so
Perfect.
You're welcome to come back on Saturday, Bob.
I'm out of town, thank you.
Yeah, you missed your Saturday opportunity.
I know.
Yeah, I didn't even get it out.
I'll have to remember for next year.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for stopping
Have a good
by.
night.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, that was very simple. Okay, so up next,
Just like Victoria, just so you know, I met with Evan for all of these. I didn't meet with him because I was told not to. I was told to meet with Evan.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, that detail must have escaped me.
Well, it escaped me too, so don't worry.
Okay, good. I'm not
No, Bob didn't
alone.
meet with me. So that's a process issue on our side. We'll correct for next
I
year.
was that memorable, Evan. That's not very nice.
Rude.
Yeesh, I didn't know you were still on. Yeah. It's been a long time since we spoke. So.
We talked on Monday.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm kidding. Yes, we met. We discussed that.
Okay.
You should let them know the balance in their account, which I think is important.
Yes. I don't know what it is.
I
will
think
get-
Mary said it's about 900,000.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Yep,
Oh, Mary was there, right?
You Heather.
she was.
See, there's my problem. I
You
just sit.
stop listening. You don't have to.
Yeah, I
participate.
just sit and cogitate.
Yeah, I assume that was part of the big meeting for everything else last Wednesday.
You came on the heels, so that was Angelina and Mark. We did the big going over on Wednesday, and then Heather and I and Mary met on Monday,
Okay.
and then I think we're meeting with Dan Kusher tomorrow. So got
Awesome.
plenty of stuff. Yep,
And we'll review almost all of it on Saturday anyway.
Yep.
So
sounds good.
it'll be very fresh in your mind.
Yes,
I'm
it'll be right at the forefront.
I'm sure. At 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday, you'll be so fresh. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. So next on the agenda is to review the FY26 Blackstone Valley Tech budget. with our guests. So please come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For introductory purposes, I'm Dr. Michael Fitzpatrick, and I serve as your superintendent at Blackstone Valley Tech. I'm joined by your local liaison school committee member, although Anthony Yitz, who's been very active both in the school committee meetings and a number of subcommittee meetings as well, and actually is a parent of some of our graduates as well. So you can make no greater commitment in that.
I was on the school committee before I even had kids.
Yeah, we're also joined by the next superintendent serving your community at Blackstone Valley Tech, Anthony Steele, who joins you here this evening.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, so Anthony is serves as the principal and has done that for a number of years. Has 28 years in the system, so he's no stranger to what we're doing. So, this is my 32nd year serving you, and I'd like to begin by saying thank you for your professionalism. Also, thank you to some of your retired members, Donald, David, and the two Susans among them. Were always a pleasure to work with. I didn't mean to leave anybody out because we have 126 finance committee members all total across the 13 towns. The best news that I can provide
Oh, phenomenal.
my days as a teacher, okay, that is an indication of the overall summary relative of our request. So we provided, per your request, the electronic versions of our budget and also hand delivered. I noticed there are additional copies over here as well, the budget. So the budget is printed by our students, and it's in a preliminary version at this point, which is not uncommon, I would think, at this juncture. Our public hearing on the budget is actually tomorrow night, so it's expected to be finalized. But even that hearing has limitations to the information that we can access. Across the state, the only numbers we've seen are the governor's numbers, and the governor's numbers are let's say conservative. I think that's a tactful term. But I'm saying that it appears that the legislature has been invited to enhance the governor's numbers, because even the $75 per student of the governor's numbers, which is less than last year, has kind of teed it up, if you will, for the legislature to take action. Although there may be an uptick in the legislative actions, that would not surprise us. We don't expect it to be of a magnitude where it will reduce the burden being placed upon the assessments across the cities and towns of Massachusetts. And that's, well, it's clearly challenging. We know that, and we're sympathetic to it, okay? We're glad we're also able to complete a number of projects in the district to help. There are different requests that have come in that range from, detailing a police cruiser to making mailboxes for a school, with just two recent projects. And so we look for alternative ways to give back for learning and for cost effectiveness. I'm pleased to say that we've gone through a year with excellent grassroots leadership from Mr. Steele and the team, led by the school committee for policy direction, that we have no legal entanglements again. So we're not redirecting legal or limited money that we have available away from education to cover lawsuits. We have no grievances from the staff. And the state has come in for another review of our special education services, which are more and more demanding, as they are in most systems, and given us stellar reports without any issue whatsoever. And so we're pleased to be able to show a solid return on investment and kind of a problem-free environment, which is a nice way to retire. Okay, so I'll walk you through the budget if I may. The budget subcommittee is an inside page. It's a cross-representation of school committee people, the independent treasurer who works with our school committee, our administrative team, our business manager who is also new, and that group met at least 10 times in publicly posted sessions, building its budget, commencing its activities back in October. So we continue to monitor. On our calendar, we expect that the House of Representatives will take action supposedly around April 17th as the next wave or next phase of the state budgetary picture. In standard practice, the Senate will follow, and then the joint committees will come together. There is some apprehension over the changes at the federal level, and to see what impact that has on certain money that helps to fund schools and helps to fund the state. We have not really traditionally benefited from stimulus money or other kinds of special allocations, so it's not a big shift for us to live without it because we didn't get it from the beginning. And so, on the other hand, as you know, and as you've recognized, and as documented in this budget process as well, we are aggressive in pursuing grants that are consistent with our mission and would expect to be, we have confirmations of about $3 million against in grants. So that's a big help to us. Right?
Which is a significant increase from last year at this time. I think we were reporting about $1 million in grants at that time. So significant increase in this year.
The budget is a total of a 5.7% increase, and of course it results in a reduction. It is statistically, there's a reduction of students, to 94 students enrolled in this current October 1. However, clearly within our district and across the state, we're not finding a correlation between student enrollments and assessments, because better than 230 school systems have reduced enrollment. Grafton is not one of them, so the state is continuing to look at other factors to drive the ability for our community to pay, and the primary emphasis is referenced in my cover letter is the 2022 property values and 2021 income levels. So that plus the municipal growth factors are coming into play as far as the state determining each community's ability to pay. Within the budget of the 5.7%, the health benefits are 4%, which matches last year. Once again, we're particularly successful with that. That would be for active employees. However, retired employees are covered under the Group Insurance Commission. An arrangement and a commitment was made before I started as superintendent, and so the state has projected the Group Insurance Commission rates to be anywhere from 9 to 22%. Okay, so it's a bit, forecasting is very much part of what we do, Evan as well, and so we're projecting a 13% increase there, and if in fact we're wrong in any of the categories, we won't come back. We'll figure out a way to pay for it. Okay, and so we've always done that. It's been like one bite at the apple, as I think Anthony has referenced. Last year, we asked our 13 towns to support an opportunity for us to pursue the Mass School Building Authority Accelerated Repair Program, which reopened after having been closed for several years. Grafton supported us in that, and also Grafton supported us in a debt exemption for that. So, however, in our conversations and regular interactions, some interactions now occurring on campus with Mass School Building Authority representation, they've indicated that we don't have to enter into a borrowing cycle in FY26, the budget's before you. School committee didn't want to borrow until it had to borrow. continues to watch the rates improve. Another interesting aspect for a community like yours, where there's a reduction in students, while it will have a part or a factor in determining the 3-year average for debt obligation. So that'll be recalibrated when we start the debt, which is not like 27, certainly not 26. And so with fewer students, although it's a 3-year average, there'll be a slight reduction in the debt obligation that the town faced. You've already taken action, so you get that all covered. So, taking the action you did, along with the other 12 partners that you have, allowed us to, to be right in front of the line, if you will, with the Mass School Building Authority. And so we're delighted to see that. However, there is no borrowing to take place in FY26. My cover letter references the fact, as Mr. Yitz mentioned, that our success with grants actually translates to about $2,400 per student in grants alone, complementing that which is provided through assessments.
Just a
We also-
note on that.
Go ahead.
Quite often, the majority of our grants go to upgrading our equipment in our shops. We don't often come back to the towns to upgrade our shops. I'm an aerospace engineer, and I could say in our manufacturing program, we have the latest equipment that our students can learn on that many of the small shops around here don't even have, and we've gotten that all through grant money. And we're at the precipice of doing that with our culinary arts program, with a significant grant that we were awarded over $1 million to upgrade our culinary arts program. So I think that the school and the district has done an excellent job of controlling those costs by aggressively going after the grants for those types of expenses.
We also extended an invitation to anyone who would like to tour and see. Several have, and we're delighted to do that. And that will continue as a full commitment to do that. It's been a good way to make certain people see firsthand your return on investment. Speaking of that, we also provided annual reports, the 32nd version of the annual reports, also printed by our students, and had these sent up some time ago, but additional copies are available. This is all part of what we feel to be our responsibility, to show you where the money that we sought, where did it go? How was it invested? How did it go? The cover letter here also mentions that now that we've made the repairs and are making other repairs that are covered, we're able to launch into adult training programs after hours. I know that's been a request across the district, but the new programs we're looking at 5 career paths, okay? The advanced manufacturing, welding, plumbing, electrical, and heating, ventilation, air conditioning. Those will be for adults, and they'll be full-fledged training programs. They're not kind of practical arts where you bring in your toaster to be fixed, okay, or learn how to change your tire. So these are, and right now, we're negotiating with the state. Mr. Steele has taken the lead on this, anticipating, of course, it would take place next year, or as quickly as the state allows us to do that. But it's expected to be subsidized by the state to a point where the people will come at no cost. So it should help with the labor shortages further, and be a nice benefit to the communities if we have a budget to do that. Okay. The next sheet is the so-called revenue sheet, and that's sounding like an oxymoron because the revenues are rather dire. All right. I've already made reference to the Chapter 70 aid, and Grafton benefits from regional transportation because it has a regional partnership with 12 other communities. We've anticipated 80% return on regional transportation. If it's higher than that, what we'll do is we'll call it a windfall. If it happens, it has yet to happen, then that is put into a stabilization account targeted just for transportation, and then it's used as it has been in the past to reduce assessments in the future. Okay, so it's somewhat different than the stabilization request that we have before you, and the town manager has confirmed that warrant article for the assessment number and the warrant article to create the stable are in place, okay, or being advanced, right? So,
They were added to the warrant, and at this stage, we're just building the warrant, but they're on there and ready to be accepted by the school board
Thank you.
when the time is appropriate. I was gonna say a date, but I realized halfway through that sentence, I can't remember what the date is off my, so when the appropriate time emerges, you know,
okay.
Smooth.
sometime.
There's some somewhat unique factors in the way with the revenues because the state Chapter 70 money was so sparse. What the school committee agreed to do was draw from its excess and deficiency, which is your free cash in a community, in the amount of $250,000 to reduce assessments, and also to use $200,000. I've made presentations in the past about the fact that the state sent us delayed billing in 2015 for support staff pension billing, not for the teachers, not for the Massachusetts retirement system, but the state discovered that it hadn't billed us and hadn't billed 7 other regional voc tech schools in 2015. They discovered they didn't bill for 2013 and 2014, so it was retroactive billing. And we took issue with that, saying, no, you can't do that. We're in no position to use 2015 money to pay a bill that you just discovered that goes back to 2013. We were never aware of the bill because no person covered by the pensions saw any loss of their pension. So it was uninterrupted, and the state just, acknowledged that it was an error. So we said, well, we accept your apology, but we're not going to pay the bill. And so the auditors, the school committee has an independent audit that is in the budget every year, required for regional schools. And the independent auditor said, you shouldn't ignore the bill from years. You should view it as a lien, and therefore you should set aside the necessary money, which is $400,000, to cover those 2 years. Okay, and so we did that, and it's been sitting there. Now that the duration, it's so old, the amnesty and other petitions to the state and the professional view of the auditors, it said that it's not collectible, and so now we can use it. And since the towns paid for it, school committee is giving it back to the towns, more than likely in 2 allocations: $200,000 for FY26 and another $200,000 in 27. And so these are small steps to ease the burden that creates the ability to give back money. The revenue sheet describes a total of 5.7%. The backside of the revenue sheet alerts our communities that the district hopes to use up to $700,000 of its certified by the Department of Revenue excess and deficiency total account. This allows us to cover the cost. Mr. Yitz made reference to a culinary arts project grant, which is $1.25 million, but there's certain aspects of that the grant doesn't cover. We'll have to pay for it, and so this is how we pay for those things. If we have a shortfall in the retiree pension health benefits stuff, then once again, this is where we go to cover those things. So the next page, unless there are any questions, are the actual assessments across the 13 towns. Douglas has, as I mentioned, sorry, Douglas, why would you care about Douglas, right? So that was last night.
We can hear about all of our neighbors.
They're good people. So, okay. Grafton has 94 students and basically 7.5% of the ownership of the regional voc district. The specific categories of spending are put forth. And the next page is a clarification to resolve anyone's confusion, if they had it, that we have no borrowing taking place in FY26. If we do have some short-term effort, the district will be covering that, okay, which would be the preliminary schematic type work to satisfy the MSBA, keep us on that path of completion. Next page is what they call the line item series budget for the state of Massachusetts, designed by Leo Toro many years ago, and it tallies the. Then you get involved in the individual pages of each of the breakouts. There are the two major budget increases, if you work through this, would be found in the pensions for non-professional or support staff, and the medical cost for those people. Those are out of our control. Okay, so we certainly benefit from the expertise and the commitment of the support people who support the professional staff. In addition, you'll find documentation that highlights both the grant list that Mr. Yip mentioned. We recognize that it's not uncommon that people brag about what they've done or what they've earned, but they can't document it. We confirm it, that's all. So it's not a hocus pocus or smoke, if you will. It's legitimate, and it's a return on investment. Kind of like what teachers call, measurable goals. Okay? There's also a little bit of a delineation of asking towns like yours and 8 others to recognize that we encourage people not to compare and contrast us with the local school system, because towns can pay many of the bills of the local school systems, and that's a good thing. We don't argue against that at all, but they're not included in those costs, but they're all included in ours. And it's from snow plowing to unemployment compensation. It's totally in here. We've never come back. We don't expect to come back this time. There was, I think, 2008, the state reduced its anticipated revenues by 9 C cuts and reduced our budget by 1.8 million. We didn't come back. You had the pain associated with that as well. And so we just had to live with that, which resulted in 14 layoffs and other changes in order to live within the budget that we had that was reconfigured. That's a summary of what's contained in the budget. Mr. Steele and myself have been making the rounds. This is our 4th, Finance Committee presentation. Some communities hold public hearings that involve both the Board of Select Persons and Finance Committee. Whatever the preference of the community is, we respect that and present before them. We've always viewed the opportunity to respond to questions and be proactive to be advantageous. It's very transparent, and it just creates a greater comfort zone. I believe Grafton is, double check this. Yeah, Grafton is the 9th, is in 9th place out of 13, I guess you might say, for the per pupil cost, if you back it in, if you choose to do that. Okay, that's a summary. Are there any questions? I want to thank the town manager for his communications, and to confirming that we've provided him what he needs to advance. I hope to be at, if I can be, sometimes I'm double and triple booked at the town meeting, but if possible, I'll be there. Mr. Yetzer certainly would be there. We'll have representation there one way or another. Okay, just a case where some towns all meet at the same night sometime.
First, I just want to acknowledge that Dan Fisher has joined us
What was that?
online as well. So, hi, Dan. Just for clarity's sake, I understand that the second warrant article that we are putting on to establish the fund mechanism for you is not actually asking for any funds, just the establishment of the pool. Could you explain that in a little bit more depth for anyone that might be watching?
I'll do my best. I'll tell you, 65 years ago, when the 13 towns came together, the communities were not covered under the new current state process, which is ability to pay. And so if you had 10% of the students, you had 10% of the bill. Nice and clean, a lot easier to sell, a lot easier to understand. But it didn't take into consideration the varied economic situations of each of the 13 towns. So different court cases have occurred, and there have been at least 2 major changes in the way the state has designed its funding. They continue to, I would say, tweak it, if you will, and we're seeing that. And so when I started 31 years ago, the state was paying 75% of the cost, and the towns were paying 25%, and you had 12 partners to help pay that. So it wasn't a tough sell. It was very attractive. Over the years, the state has said, "Oh, we never prompted." Well, that's my comment about this. The state has not reneged, but gradually reduced its ability and saying it can no longer subsidize the cost of education, and so it has shifted that. And so the current arrangement has basically about 40% of the burden or responsibility coming from the state, 60%, far different than the 25%, okay, of 65 years ago, or at least the time that and so that's a major shift. While there may be some disappointment in the state not subsidizing education to the level it once did, it is still mindful to recognize that the state does give us $10 million in Chapter 70 money. We'll see what the final number is. They'll give us a major allocation of regional transportation. So it's hard to, you have to live within their rules, I guess, and say that, you're at the mercy of that. The school, in the budget presentations, I can assure you that when someone comes before the budget subcommittee, they need to be well armed, as they do in your process, to explain what they need, why do they need it, can they live without it, have they tried to acquire it through a non-tax process. And oftentimes they can, either by donations or contribution. They can offset and reduce the original request that they would make. The ongoing inflationary rates are 7-8%, generally speaking. And you notice, for example, a couple of weeks ago, Worcester Telegram reported that the Worcester school system had a 7.9%, with the city paying most of its bills. Our total request is 5.7%. It covers all our expenses. Some of those expenses include the fact that this is the FY26 would be the third year of a teacher's contract. It's a 3% raise, negotiated in collective bargaining. The collective bargaining was done without legal representation. It went through smoothly. There were no gaps, or I don't think there were any hard feelings. It was fair. The bus contract is also unknown. It's in the fourth year of that, and it's a 7% increase, which is fairly reasonable given the what bus contracts go for student transportation. And these are some of the factors that are all analyzed. Where we're dealing with a known, it makes it much easier to forecast. In some cases, we don't know. We don't have an updated number from the state on the medical coverages of retirees. We built in a 13% increase. They said you better be prepared to go up to 22. We'll see how close we can, right? So, but that's something we would inherit. We don't negotiate it.
So can you comment on the need for the second warrant article?
The creation of the stabilization.
It's been recommended, if I may, the stabilization. Many of the regional schools, there's roughly 80 of them in Massachusetts. And I've had the pleasure of serving as president of that association, of their organization, have stabilization accounts as another alternative to raise money and then not go to the towns for capital improvements, but go to your own reserves. The stabilization warrant article has asked for no money in next year, and it's. Someone did ask and said, well, how will you fund it? I said, well, the current funding is $30 has been donated if we create it. That's kind of funny, but that's true. Okay. And so that's the way we do things anyway. So it wouldn't be a big surprise. The stabilization was recommended by the treasurer. It was recommended by bond counsel, and we anticipate it'll strengthen our Moody rating as well. Since we haven't borrowed, all those things can be advantageous. The one town, well, we asked for that last year, and then we withdrew it because since we wanted everyone to focus on the bond that has the reimbursement, and so rather than having too much on the table at once, like playing cards with your in-laws, so that we pulled it back and said that but the one town, Hopedale, said, we'd like to advance it anyway. And it's, okay, I guess if you choose to do that, and they approved it. So one town approved it, and the stabilization is different than the budget. The budget has to be approved by 2/3 of the towns, which are 9. Then all towns have to recognize it. But the stabilization is a simple majority, so it's 7. Okay, so it doesn't. You would expect it's not politically it's not an obstacle. You would think. There's been no opposition to it. Okay, and it's strongly recommended by all the fiscal observers that we benefit from.
Madam Chair. Your capital stabilization makes perfect sense, right? We have them in the municipal world. School districts have them. It makes perfect sense. My only question is, in order to, you have to have a simple majority, so that will be a separate warrant article anytime you want to remove money from that stabilization account to use it for a capital expense?
Right. Good. Yeah. It has to be transparent.
Right.
Yeah.
So it won't be as part of the regular budget with withdrawal. You'd have to have a separate article to do that. Probably.
I don't want to say that because it appears that it could be a line item in the regular budget.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, but obviously it would be part of the discussions we would
Yeah,
have,
right.
like we have conversation about pensions or any other aspect of the budget.
Yep.
So I don't think I think it'll be within, but still not vulnerable, but still really, it's still open to
Right.
any conversation or question about it. And whatever is in it would be before you as well.
Right. I was. Yes, I agree. I was just from a purely procedural standpoint. When we have articles that have 2 different vote counts, usually they need to be separate. So I just was asking as a matter of interest as a town administrator, not because I'm doubting that it'll be transparent and we'll have plenty of time to look at it.
There's also a safety valve in that the school committee would be hurting itself if it loaded up that particular line. They would endanger the total budget of 27 and 20. You don't want to do that to a brand new superintendent.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly. Exactly. No.
but and Grafton used options that the other 12 towns didn't in the $36 million borrowing. Okay, which has now been totally paid off, and it was reimbursed at 75.5%. And so we would I would recommend respect whatever process you're most comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any questions?
So looking at per student increase of about $1,100 this year for Grafton, can you kind of break down where the major drivers of that?
Well, it's spread across the full 5.7%.
Yeah.
In fairness, okay, in that there's no increase in personnel. It's actually the total FTE count is 0.4. Okay, and the major change is recruiting more special education people, and also having someone be designated to run this new adult effort, because it's pretty massive with 5 different programs. Okay, and so those are costs that are built in. If you look through the budget, I think the percentages are oftentimes somewhat misleading because it says this is up. What's the dollar difference? What's the delta? What's the and the 2 major increases as I scanned this budget as it was built are the 2 that I mentioned. Okay, and they're both in the pension categories. All right, which I guess that's a little awkward because pension are people who formerly worked for the system. They're not currently serving students, but nevertheless, we recognize the system has never created any kind of incentive to retire. There's no buyout or things of that nature. There's no sick leave buyout or other kinds of vacation buyout or any of that stuff. So they haven't loaded it up to drive an increase in that. And I can assure you that what we've designed in our building, which is not very young, okay, is that students are safe. The level of instruction is sophisticated. We're able to add new technology regularly, usually without going to the towns. and the education is solid. So nobody's losing as a result of living with the 5.7%. I hope that's at least helpful, because it's so spread across, hundreds and hundreds of categories. And if you dig deeper into each of the line sections, there's a rationale for each category.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. By the way, our attendance is solid. We haven't experienced the chronic absenteeism that some systems have been faced with. Our dropout rate is 0. Right. The interest in coming is continuing to be strong overall, and I think one of the reasons why Grafton saw a decline is they saw a bit of a spike for a while there. Okay.
Yeah, for about 10 years after the Grafton High School was built, we significantly dropped in attendance from Grafton students going to BVT. And we were 102 in 2011, 115 in 2012, 105 in 2013. And then as the school began to open, we dropped as low as 60. And for 10 years, we were between 60 and 80 students coming from Grafton. Now, the past 3 years have seen Grafton go back up to, from 94 to 104. So over the past 3 years, as maybe people have gotten used to the new school and are now considering BVT again. But there's also a very strong interest in technical education now as a viable option to college. So we're seeing still a lot of competition to get into our school. But even with that, the Grafton numbers are back in the 90 to 100 student range per year, where it was prior to the new high school that was built.
So you mentioned a dropout rate of 0. What do you consider a dropout?
That would not count someone who transferred or family relocated, but that would be someone who didn't complete their education from us. And
So someone that transferred out of BVT back to their original school would not affect that
that's
rate?
correct.
Okay, so it's not percentage of ones that have graduated. It's percentage of people who don't complete high school.
Correct, completers, right, completers and non-completers.
Okay,
That's
so
accurate.
so someone that completes it somewhere else is still considered
That would be, that's
completing.
considered to be a transfer.
Okay.
Under the state's, parlance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just related to education, we regularly hit 100% on the MCAS of students passing advanced.
Yeah.
So
The last MCAS scores were some of the strongest of the district again. So the state decided to remove that as an absolute requirement, but they're still encouraged the test to take place, kind of to be included in students' say portfolio, so, but not a requirement for high school graduation. So we have strong requirements for graduation. So a change of MCAS didn't impact that. So we did not support removing the MCAS, but that's another decision that was out of our hands.
Do you have in front of you the numbers that were used for the enrollment for the bond calculation? Because I thought last year when we talked about it, that if it went off a year, like if it was a year later, we actually would have been in worse circumstances because our numbers had gone up in the more recent years. So when you were just saying that if it gets recalculated next year, I think we're actually going to be worse off. But it's possible I'm remembering that wrong, but I remember thinking like, oh, if it goes through this year, like the past 3 were lower and we'd seen this trend coming up. So I'm wrong about that, but
No, I don't think you're wrong about that, and you're on target. It's a 3-year average, okay,
Right.
of October 1, and that's consistent with the regional agreement that you came into.
no, I know.
Okay.
But I just
And
remember
so-
thinking that if we got it last year, we were in better shape than if it got pushed off a year or two. We would have been with higher numbers that the average would have been on.
I think that was assuming our enrollment percentage would continue to increase, and it decreased this time.
I mean,
Okay.
it decreased this year, but we're actually, so if the 3 years started 26 and back, we're up 6 students than if it started last year. Right, we swapped 2023, which was 88 students, for this year, which is 94.
Right.
So it is still a higher percentage.
Six students.
I don't think you'll see a major shift.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the right now, it's a 7.5% ownership or participation rate, and so I don't think there's any joy in seeing it reduce in any given year, but technically it you know, it has a small impact on what would be the ownership of the bond. Keep in mind, the bond which you've exempted, right, will be borrowed gradually or phased, and we'll be applying the reimbursements. It's accelerated repair, so you can submit $50,000 threshold reimbursement request to the state, and they'll start to reimburse you then. And so that'll come back to us quickly as we can. The state gives it to us. So at no point do you experience the full brunt, if you will, or burden of the total bond. Okay, and you have 12 other partners, which is very different than bonding that's done at the local level, because it's you and you alone.
I think one of the things that helps us this go around is back when the first bond went through for the $36 million improvement, we were around 80 students or so, but the overall population of the school was around 900. Now the overall population of the school is almost 1,200 and almost 1,260 now. So it's a bigger population, but we really haven't jumped that much with respect to that other number going up. So
I hope that's helpful. Okay.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Had we had asked last year about the availability of the whatever documents it was that were used to form the school district, and you said you'd look into see if those could get posted online. I haven't found anything yet. Do you know if those have been made available at this point?
Which ones?
for the original.
Whatever, like the agreements that were.
The regional
Town
agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It is on the website.
Okay.
And I thought we had addressed that, but this is new information that it didn't work for you. Okay.
I just haven't found it yet. It might be there. I just haven't seen it. So
Okay, great.
if you know where it might be, if you could let us know, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
right.
We can send you a direct link
Would
to
you,
it.
we'll send
Okay.
you, we'll send you.
Make it easier to find.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's likely under a community tab on our website, but we'll cut right to the chase for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
I told the new superintendent, anticipate he's gonna get some assignments here. We're glad to provide that to you.
Okay. Phenomenal. Well, first and foremost, congratulations on your retirement,
Oh, thank you so
Fitzpatrick.
much.
We're very, very happy for you, and
Thank you.
at least I can speak for myself. The last 3 years, I've always looked forward to this presentation. I've truly enjoyed working with you, and look forward very much to working with Mr. Steele in the future. So thank you for everything you've done for Grafton and the surrounding communities as a good steward of the BVT and our students that we send there.
Thank you very much. It's been a great journey. Thank you. I appreciate it. See you in town.
Yeah, see you around.
Thank you.
See you around.
Oh.
And I love the visual aid.
Dr. Fitzpatrick and I are neighbors.
Oh, really?
Not literal neighbors, but we both come from Munson. So I'll miss seeing you on the highway in the morning on the way in.
I go jogging by, he goes by with his tractor.
That feels right.
It doesn't it though?
Yeah, that seems accurate.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
And a cap that bends his eyebrows.
That's true.
Melanoma is a silent killer. Good for you.
Yeah, what's that?
Keeping yourself safe.
Yes.
Skin cancer.
Absolutely. Oh, I got it. It's all over.
Okay. So let us know if they send you over that link, please.
Make sure that gets out to. Hopefully, you'll send it to somebody that gets to everybody. But if not, we will make sure it gets out.
Thank you, sir. Very kind of you. Okie dokie. Next up on the agenda, it's vague, so I'm open to discussion on how we'd best like to focus this conversation and how we'd like to structure it. But as written, discuss paths forward for the FY26 budget and to prepare for our joint meeting with the select board and school committee, which Amber was kind enough to schedule and send over today. So I believe we're going to be meeting with them next Tuesday for an hour and then continuing if necessary on the Thursday. Does that sound right?
Correct.
The 18th.
18th, then 20th.
Yes, ma'am.
What time?
6
6
o'clock.
on Tuesday and 7 on Thursday.
And then we have our meeting with Dr. Cummings in the middle on that Wednesday at 7.
Right.
3 straight days of finance committee action. That'll be great.
Yep.
So exciting. I, for one, have never been more excited. Great fun. Evan's gonna be so sick of us.
I'm just gonna get a cot and just I'm just gonna stay. It's not worth traveling.
Bunk bed.
Oh, we have so much room for activity.
There you go.
I was so hoping you'd say that.
Oh, they're taking out all those lockers. You can just.
No, just we have found some pretty interesting stuff in the walls. at
Sleep
doing
in the
that.
walls.
Sure.
Yep.
So I don't know if Angelina, maybe I had an opportunity to watch it, but you were there. If you want to give us a rundown of the TRICOM meeting and some of the takeaways and action items that we might want to build upon.
Well, so I feel like the TRICOM meeting is kind of moot at this point because then it went to select board and completely changed.
Yeah.
So I don't want to confuse people with what happened at TRICOM. We had 3 scenarios that we had asked Evan and Jay, Dr. Cummings, to work on, and then you met with select board with one of the scenarios, which was to kind of try to find some money and maybe cut a little bit, and then not have to do an override. But it was sort of lukewarmly received, I would say, from select board, and but I think you left that meeting with the directive to look at it, even though it wasn't unanimously loved by any means, very hesitantly.
Yes.
We'll look at what you say, kind of a thing.
Yep. As far as the TRICOM, we were asked to look at a 1-year override, a 5-year override, and what was the third?
Like a 5-year override with cuts,
With cuts,
basically.
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
half
right.
and half.
So
Yeah.
Jay and I have met several times on that. We've also taken into account the subsequent meetings we've had, and so we are still going to honor the TRICOM's request to show override numbers. So we're building that slide deck now,
Okay.
with the anticipation that that'll be kind of front and center at 6 on Tuesday. But we did already do our override for 1 year. We broke that apart as 1 year with cuts, 1 year without cuts. 5 years with cuts, 5 years without cuts. And then we've also been really,
Just on the school side or also on the municipal side? What cuts were you looking at? I know you'll go into detail, but I'm just curious.
yeah. So our directive has been to not reduce and to reconfigure things on our side of the house to close the gap in funding that the schools is going to need. So we have been, in my opinion, very creative and looking for alternative ways to get us across that finish line. We did reduce 2 part-time staff in order to help the process. Compared to what Dr. Cummings is talking about, I don't want to put that out there like, look what we did. I'm not suggesting that. But I think we have a pretty good approach going right now that is going to give Finance Committee, Select Board, School Committee some really viable options to make a decision next week, because we're gonna need to have some finite direction and try to get this over the finish line. So yeah, we are also gonna we spent an inordinate amount of time reconfiguring the 5-year forecast updating it with the current 26 projected budget and then seeing where that falls, and running different scenarios within it so that we'll be able to more concisely illustrate for you folks, if you do X for fiscal 26, this is what it looks like in fiscal 30 or 31.
That's very
And doing that on multiple different scenarios, which is complicated.
Yeah,
That's a lot of work.
to say the least.
So
That's a lot of
yeah,
work.
yeah, we did have I will share with you. We did have a meeting to ensure that we all were talking about the same numbers, because there were so many different variations out there that it was very easy to get lost in the data. And so Jay and I had, Dr. Cummings and I had met and just determined that we were going to build a shared slide deck as we met each different stage, and that's the talking point that we both have. That one's done, and then move on to the next one, just to try to get some coherent path forward. So I think we've done some pretty strong work together in the past couple of weeks, and yeah, like I said, I think you'll have some viable options come next week. So yeah, that'll impact some of our conversation on Saturday, I would presume. Just with the expectation that, you know, we have till Tuesday, so we're going to be continuing to work on it through the weekend and on till then.
So you do have Skip joining us.
Oh, hello, Skip. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Sorry for my tardiness.
Understood. Time changes are hard.
Yeah. Good to see you, Skip.
Dan, please, your hand.
Yeah, so I also watched the tri-committee meeting.
That's my bad. Hold on one second.
A concern that I have is the conversation seemed to be very focused around the idea of on one side there's an override for level services, and the other side there's no override and big cuts. And then, well, what about in the middle? What about if we compromise between those two positions? And to me, I feel like that's the wrong framing. To me, the level services is the compromise between reducing our schools and growing the investment that we have in public education. I happen to know at least a few people who I've talked to who would love to see a bigger override that would grow the investment that we have in our public schools. I know that there's no chance that'll get through the select board, but I know that there are people in town who want that. And to frame this this conversation as you know, there's these two sides, and one of the sides is level services. I think that's not an accurate representation of the diversity of opinions in Grafton. I think the level services has been the compromise. It's been what we've gone with in, you know, the last two overrides, because that's it's kind of just sticking with what we're doing. And I think the idea of reducing the level of services and also doing an override, to me, that's kind of a worst of both worlds option. So I just wanted to kind of give that alternative perspective that I think was not represented at the tri-committee meeting.
I appreciate the reframing of the narrative. I think it's a tough one, right? Because it is such a diametric opposite from the other side of the spectrum, which is, you know, let the kids touch the hot stove, go with the reduction budget. This is what we have, run with it, right? Which is a pure dollar play and not value play. I think it's hard to have the hearts and minds conversation at the same time as the dollars and cents conversation, right? but I 100% appreciate what you're saying, which ultimately is that the level funding and the level budgets that we have been surviving on over the last 10 years, over the last 2 overrides, have not, it hasn't been a joyride, right? We haven't been building super parks at the elementary school. I mean, this money is for dry erase markers and bare bones salaries. I guess my question is, if what does pushing or performing that narrative forward, what's the end goal, right? Like, what are we hoping to accomplish by throwing in that, like, additional pool or additional series of thoughts? I guess, like, what do you think that we'll win or do or accomplish with that?
So I guess kind of taking another step back and kind of a slightly larger view of things, I think there's also another idea, another kind of implicit idea that I don't totally agree with, which is this idea that we're asking the taxpayers for something, and we're asking people to make some kind of sacrifice or something, and it's, we should feel really bad about it, and we should come in apologizing and explaining how we got here. But I think it's really more about what the community wants. It's what kind of community we want to be. Do we want to be a community that pays a little bit more to continue funding education at the level we've been funding it at? Do you want to change to be a community that is funding schools less and getting lower quality education that is going to, kind of snowball into lower and lower quality? Or even on that other side of it, do we want to be a community that invests more in education? I feel like that's really what the question is about. And it's not about we have to show taxpayers that we're willing to have cuts too, because we're asking them to do something, so we have to do something too. This kind of like the split between the taxpayers and the government, to me, is like this artificial thing. Like, we are the taxpayers. The taxpayers are the government. It's a democracy. It's in large part representative democracy, but it's like the people are deciding what we want for our community. And so I think so to get back to the question you actually asked, I think the acknowledging that there is this perspective in town of people who want to go in the other direction, I think is a good thing. And I think it helps to show that the middle option really is level services. And it really feels like the override with cuts option is like we're negotiating against ourselves. So yeah, it just, I think what I think we get from having this perspective in the conversation is better representation of the range of views in the community. And if we're looking at what we think that residents want and will vote for, I think there are people who would vote against an override with cuts because they don't want the cuts, and they're willing to throw the whole thing out in hopes that we'll get another option to have level services.
when you, if we're done with that thread.
Sure.
So one of the things that I've seen in community discussions and even discussions in this room is that this is all the school's fault. The first override was schools and roads. The second override was schools and fire and capital stabilization. And people are seeing this override as schools, as in the school's budget is ballooning way faster than the town budget. And that's simply not the case. The school budget is consistently 60% and sometimes a little bit less of the town budget. So this is not a school's problem. And I think framing it as a school's problem makes people think, oh, well, it's just the school's problem. I don't have any kids in the schools. Why should that affect me? Or it's the schools are mismanaging this or things like that. And I think that's something that we should try very hard to avoid, and maybe even actively say that, yeah, that's not what this is. This isn't, the schools aren't being managed properly. Our costs are growing faster than the state aid, which is steadily decreasing as a percentage of our budget. And it's growing faster than the 2.5% cap that was put in place 45 years ago, and things like that. So I think those are important things to talk about in some of these discussions.
I think that's the middle step. I think that's why the idealistic narrative, while my personal views might align quite well with that, right? I would love to see us be able to, ensure that the Grafton education system is the greatest in the state. I think that we're still at Greg's talking point, which is folks don't actually fully understand why we're coming to them at year 5 of a 5-year override asking for another override, right? We said that this was going to happen. We knew that this was going to happen. This is a state funding issue. This is an inflation issue. This is not a Grafton does not know how to manage its funds issue. And I think continuing that campaign of general education, getting folks to that level of understanding, like, well, we were kind of handed a mud sandwich, that's we get that buy-in, and then we can move to the next phase. I fear that jumping to rainbows too quickly might turn folks off, right? Because they're already fighting for what I agree is untenable. Why have cuts in an override? To me, that doesn't make any sense. We're not going to give you what you've normally had, and we're going to raise your taxes. That's goofy in my opinion. Skip, your hand is up.
Yeah, sure. So I'm kind of tired of hearing people talk about the awful thing that Proposition 2.5 is, because it's actually a very good thing. It's a set of guardrails that was put together to say that the town's fathers, whether it be finance committee or the selectmen or the school committee, can have this X amount of money without going crazy. If you want to have more and have everybody agree, yes, we want to spend a little bit more of our tax money to do something, then everybody gets involved in it. That's all that Prop 2.5 is. Someone hit on the real problem here, which is state aid. If you went back and looked at what the level of state aid was in 1980, what it is today, and what inflation has done, and add the unfunded mandates that we have from the state, you will find the solution to the problem. It's plain and simple. Just do the math. And that's the problem with this whole thing. It's people setting up against each other, and that's not the problem. It's in Boston.
Just, I know you understand the issue with Proposition 2.5, but a lot of people here do. But there are a lot of people that see it as if the town has to go for an override because this 2.5% from 45 years ago was hit, that means the town has done something wrong. And that is a very prevalent idea among a lot of the people involved. Now, granted, some kind of cap on that, on growth, is appropriate. I don't know that 2.5% is appropriate with something that's not tied to inflation, but the original intent was good. It's just gotten difficult to work with, and it's been so long that a lot of people don't understand what it is.
Yeah, it is. It's tough to work with, Greg, but the issue remains is the law says the town can do it within its own workings a certain amount.
Yep.
If the town wants to do more than that, it must consult with all of the people. That's all that is. And if you get the support of enough people, then you do it. If you don't get the support of everybody to go over that guardrail, then you can't do it. That's it. And people have to understand that. If they don't, then it's just not going to work for them. They'll be stuck in the wrong mindset forever.
Dan? You're on mute.
It's been 5 years. I'm used to it by now. I think that kind of it gets to my point about this like hand-wringing, apologizing thing that we do with Prop 2.5 and the overrides is like we shouldn't be apologizing. Like this is we're not asking the voters to give something or do something. We're asking the voters, would you like to have this increase in taxes to cover level services? Like it's just I agree with Greg. I feel like it would be more meaningful if it were tied to inflation in some way, like a variable way that actually reflects actual inflation rather than the arbitrary 2.5%. But I agree with Skip's point that it is about just letting the voters having a speed bump for the voters to weigh in when it's beyond a certain threshold. And so it's not something that we need to feel bad about asking the voters. It's not something that, we need to soften it before we ask. It would be great if we could offer a few options in a single override question. But unfortunately, they only let you have a yes or no on a single one. So that's what we have to do.
You can actually have multiple levels on a Prop 2.5 override.
I didn't know that. That is something worth looking into, I think.
Well, luckily, a lot of the numbers are being run.
I mean, I don't know about that, about how confusing that would be.
Yes.
But
I didn't say it would be a great idea. As it is possible.
splitting the vote
It'd be,
75 ways.
Right.
You vote with the highest numbers first, and the first one to pass makes it.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Angelina.
So I think at that TRICOM meeting, the temperature was definitely, like, I was just trying to get everybody to acknowledge that any cuts were not like comfortable cut. It was not level services. So like anything that happened, if we cut the budget, it was going to be cutting services, and then we would not be level services. And I understand what you're saying about the, growing the schools, but I also feel like it's a hard conversation to have when you have people wondering why, like whoever was that you that said that, we have people wondering why we're having an override again. Like, what do you mean they're coming back again for another override? And it's like trying to ask for more money and to expand it further, for me feels slightly irresponsible. Not just because we don't have the funding. So like every year we're coming against this gap. And even with level services, we know that in 5 years, we're going to again be having to raise taxes more. So to like increase that base that we're having to raise every time when we don't have the funding from the state, I don't know that irresponsible is the right word, but it feels like you're spending money that you know you don't have, and asking people in the future to continue to increase at this increased rate that isn't just giving them what they have, but it's growing it. And I understand what you're saying. Like if that is what the temperature is and that's what people want to do, awesome. But I mean, what I'm hearing when I talk to people is, what do you mean there's another override coming? Right. So I don't know. And maybe it's just the people that I'm talking to. I certainly don't know everyone in town. But yeah, I was really trying to get people to understand that cuts meant not level services. And, you know, it was the temperature on the select board feels not super, like they don't really want an override even to go on in the first place, is how most of that conversation went. It's like, well, let's see what we can cut. So it was definitely, it feels like an uphill battle, at least with the representation. I don't know what it will be with the actual town when they vote, whether it will be an uphill battle, but that's what it feels like now.
I completely agree. I think it's difficult enough at this point to, the comments that you hear from elected officials to average town folk is, well, trim the fat, right? I'm sure that there's extra XYZ here and there, and everyone in this room that has gone through the budget line item by line item knows that is just absolutely not the case.
Right.
Okay, Skip, please.
So I guess some of what I heard when I went to the school committee meeting when Dr. Cummings presented his cut down budget are very similar to things that I heard when I first became aware of this process, probably starting back in 1980 sometime. There was doom and gloom about class sizes and all kinds of cuts in what was going to happen. There was going to be classes with 25 or 30 kids in them. We didn't do everything back then. The class sizes are still the same as the class sizes were back then. I see a town that has made some mistakes along the way that could have nipped some of this in the bud, and they didn't do it, and the cat's out of the bag, so to speak. Now, the question, one of the things we asked for in a prior time when I was on the committee was for everybody to go back and do a zero-based budget. People thought that would start where you were last year. There is a feeling when people talk about hearing from the outside that there's a lot of non-statutory education that goes on. And there is a lot of non-statutory education that goes on. We as a town decided years ago to add kindergarten, to add preschool. Those are programs. Do you want to see those cut out? Well, I don't think so, but you could probably balance the budget taking those out, but there's a cost associated with doing that. And I, kind of harp on it, but this is a problem that's not of our making. It came from Boston, and they've turned education upside down, and we have all kinds of stuff that we have to deal with that we get no money from them for. So people have to think about this as a local issue, but also kind of start turning up some heat there and letting the people in Boston know about this too.
A fair point. Wasn't there a letter between the school committee and the select board jointly to Senator Moore?
No, it wasn't joint, but it was a letter from the select board in support of reviewing the millionaire's tax, essentially, rather than waiting for the full 10 years to elapse to do it sooner, to look at the allocation of that.
Skip, the point is well made. We don't have to, as a tax and
voter base relies solely on the select board. We are all empowered to make those calls and emails and
We do have
please
a hand on Zoom
ourselves. Do we?
from an
Amy.
attendee from the school committee.
Yes. Amber, if we could allow Amy a comment, please. Amy,
Can you
Marr?
hear?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Amy Marr. I'm the chair of the Grafton School Committee, but I can't speak for the committee on something we haven't deliberated. So these are things we've deliberated on. The school committee approved last night a letter that's going to go to our representative and our senator and the governor regarding leftover Fair Share Act funds that could be distributed to school districts to help with this problem. It's kind of a Hail Mary pass, but we're doing it. And that's at the recommendation of the MMA and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. We also continue to advocate for increased school funding from the state via MASC, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. We always invite Senator Moore and Representative Meridian to attend our budget hearing and, come and hear us and hear the problem. They took us up on it 2 years ago. They came to a joint meeting. And that year, I believe Representative Meridian did advocate very strongly for an increase in per pupil spending, as he does every time. And some of you may recall that our pleas to Senator Moore to reopen the formula fell on deaf ears, and he was quite angry and told us that, this is what we said was going to happen, and you didn't listen. Grafton's a minimum aid district, as you know. We're one of 311 districts in Massachusetts that have this problem, and the formula needs to be revised. We continue to advocate for that. We're doing the best we can. We're not waiting 5 years and advocating every 5 years. So to anybody who's listening who's not on FinCom, please know that we are doing our job. We are advocating constantly. And the select board is helping us out this year with a joint letter, which is great. I think it looks much better with the signatures of 2 boards than just the one. So thank you for your comment, Skip.
I just have a question for Evan. The one-time funds that were used by the school this year in 25, is replenishing them part of the scenarios you're building? No, okay.
No, well, I do want to just make it clear though. I am following. Like we're not doing that. Dr. Cummings is working on that, and we're meeting to discuss. We're not driving that train of what gets moved and where in any way.
Yeah.
So the 1.2 million that was used from one-time funds is now back in the operating budget, but there is no replenishment of those funds.
Right, that's what I'm asking, yeah. So that would be under his control, you're saying, how those funds get replenished?
Yeah,
in the budget that he's building.
Should they be available? Yes. I don't know that he has a choice on where to replenish or not replenish and all of that, but I just didn't want it to sound like we're choosing whether or not to replenish. Like we're
no. I just didn't know if it was part of the scenario. Because didn't he say that it had to be replenished within a certain amount of time?
No.
For it to.
I don't believe so.
No. Okay.
And Amy said no before me, so I'm going to take that what it is.
Sorry, somebody needs to turn me off.
No, I'm perfectly happy with it, Amy, because I was gonna just guess, because that's how I operate, right?
You're a dad. Your default's not no.
No, I just make stuff up for my kids all the time. I can't imagine what it's like at school for them.
All right, Skip, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had I guess I'll ask the question first, and then everybody can laugh at my second statement. But the money that the school department has in these funds, does it get looked at when we get our bond rating examined?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that they're that granular when we're showing that to the S&P and Moody's.
All right, so that would not matter at all to the bond people?
My understanding of what the bond people are looking at is that they're looking at our financial stability as far as town stabilization and town free cash as percentage of overall budget as outlined in our financial management plan.
Okay.
Those
And
are
the
those
second-
are revolving accounts, and I don't believe they're looking at revolving accounts. They're just looking at stabilization accounts and free cash.
Okay. And I don't know where to find it. And this is the, whatever you want to call it. No matter how I say this, it's not going to come out right. So I'll just come out and say it is how much money is in these, and this is the line, the slush funds. And they're not slush funds or anything like that, but I don't know what to call them.
They're you mean the schools? They're called revolving accounts.
Okay, so it's in their revolving accounts. How much is in there?
I don't know that top of mind, Skip,
Okay.
but we can certainly get you that information of what the total balance.
Just
of
in
revolving
general.
accounts are.
That's all.
Yep, I do know that they use them frequently throughout their budget process, so I think they change. But we can certainly, I can get you a snapshot in time.
Yeah, just the aggregate amount. That's all.
Sure.
I have one more question that's not really related to those other ones. It's more of a procedural one. The last two times we've done an override, we've done a balanced budget at town meeting and then an additional appropriation for conditional upon the passage of the override.
Okay.
I've heard other people saying that you can also just pass the budget as it would be if the override was approved and then make cuts afterwards. Are those both valid ones, and have we talked about which way it'd be presented?
We haven't talked about that. I think the general assumption is that we would do a contingent budget. Contingent budgets generally, in my opinion, on the warrant at least, look cleaner, and they showcase what exactly happens to the taxpayer in a more clear way to me. But happy to have a conversation about what would work best for the taxpayers of Grafton. I don't think we're locked in at any point at this point.
I was just wondering if there are any procedural, if it's better to have just the one budget at town meeting and then the one budget on the override on the ballot versus
It's a valid,
potentially
yeah.
the additional allocation being not approved at town meeting, but then the override being passed anyways on the ballot. So
Right. Yeah, I think, I mean, in my general opinion, the contingent budget shows you exactly what the cuts are, because if you don't vote for it, these are the things that are not going to be funded. I think it makes it really clear. But I will admit, I haven't seen a lot of examples of people doing it the other way. And so certainly happy to take a look at that.
Okay. That's all I've got.
So, I think I know the answer to this. I'm going to ask it just so I'm not incorrect. So previously the two overrides were schools and roads, and then schools and police and everything else. Is there a reason now, I'm assuming it's because the schools is the largest budget and the one that we're just not funding the full ask for the increase. Is there a reason we don't look at other departments and look at cuts there to make the schools cuts or schools funding gap less, and also loop or associate more departments and things with the override to make it more appealing, tenable? I don't know what the exact word would be, but is there a reason we don't do that?
Yes.
Okay.
So generally speaking, we'll just use the town school. I know we're trying to get away from that, but I think for ease of conversation, we need to just say town and school. And that maybe easier to discuss. There is a sentiment that the town side of the budget, when it suffers cuts, those cuts are more drastic because we have less people in each of those departments. And so the general thinking is that since we are on our side of the budget carrying a certain amount of the school district's costs, that when we suffer large increases in things like health insurance and pension liability and anything else, that that acts as a cut on our side of the house because we've level funded everything. We've grown, and level funding is a cut, right? It's a reduction, as you were talking about level, or maybe that was Dan that was doing that. Is that the right approach or the wrong approach? It's not really what my role is in the conversation. But it is hard for, folks on the town side of the budget to look for reductions when our health insurance number this year is going to be an $800,000 increase. We just got another $200,000 added to the $600,000 today because our numbers have gotten exponentially worse in January and moving into February. So you can frame that narrative in any way, and I will not digress. I will. My opinion as a town administrator is that the elected officials and the appointed officials craft the narrative of how you reach out. I give you the numbers and the approach, and I give suggestions, but realistically, you folks should be crafting that narrative. And maybe the narrative is, yeah, it's partially the schools, but we also can't eat $800,000 in health insurance increases, regardless of what side of that fence they fall on. And that's a valid conversation point, I think.
Was that the second $200,000 increase, or is that just the same? Because you said you got another one today.
Yep. So it was 600. We were told to budget 15.25% increase,
Okay.
which we've covered. That was 660,000.
Okay.
Today we were told to budget 18.75, I think, or 18.25. I'd have to just check my notes, but that equates to another $208,000.
Okay.
Right. So I think that's the issue is like what you're saying. So like if you take the 1.6 that the school was going to cut 2 weeks ago, which is ancient history now,
right?
Half of that is health insurance. Half of it is the school, like technically. But I think when you have, particularly coming from a couple of members of select board, this town versus school positioning on every single thing that happens, then that becomes the narrative. And I think this narrative got way far away from us before we even had real numbers in front of us. My daughter's in high school, and there were teachers standing outside with signs last week. The kids were all freaking out in the classrooms. They're going to cut teachers' salaries. And I'm like, no, they're not, but this is what the kids are all talking about. So I think that this got away from us very quickly. And I think in this town in particular, and I can't speak for any other town, but I think here there's this kind of awful history of town versus school. And so, I feel like we're moving away from that with all of the new people that come in, but there's still this messaging, and that is exactly where this went right from the beginning. Unfortunately, I think it got away from us. The narrative got away from us.
Yeah.
Because in reality, health insurance is going up 18%, which is a massive increase to the town, like to everyone. And when I say the town, I don't mean the town versus the school. I mean
everyone that works here.
all of the employees, their health insurance costs are going up almost 20%. And we can raise taxes 2.5%. So, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, I think it, and I use this word very cautiously, demonizes the school.
Sure.
For
Yeah.
not balancing
And they're not
their
a
budget.
revenue. They're not a revenue producing.
No.
Nor should they be.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like that's not the nature of what a school district does.
Right.
So.
And
it's problematic for sure.
So if we go and ask for money for the schools versus do we go and ask money for the schools and X department and X department and X department?
Yeah.
I mean, that ask gets, I'm not sure if that's easier or worse, but I think it's something to look at.
Well, you had that nice little schedule of how much all the line items have gone up, and the school was like whatever. I think it was 3 point something % or 4, I don't know, I don't remember what it was, but that clearly shows all, the town lines with the police and the fire and all of that was 3%. Like, it's these particular costs that are really out of control.
Yeah, it's about 6.5% based on last year without the 1.2 million. If you put the 1.2 million back in, it's down around 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
It's
On that particular chart that you
Yeah.
had out was
We show it and we don't get that granular.
Yeah.
We're showing right now, if you just take fiscal 25 and fiscal 26 if the number is still 47,274,683, which I think is the number from last night. That's just by percentage, it's 5%.
Yeah.
That's a straight comparison without, adding money back in
Yeah.
or taking out, which I take your point, but I didn't get that
Yeah,
granular.
that's understand.
Okay. And our unclassified without today's increase was 11.4%, that's your health insurance and your pension liability, right? Every other department, like general government without unclassified, is 2.6%. Public safety's 3.1. We talked to Dr. Fitzpatrick tonight. They're negative 3.8. Public works is 3.7. Health and Human Services negative 2.6, and Culture and Recreation is 6.8. But as I had stated before, much smaller numbers, so it just blows it way out of proportion. So that's a total budget, again, not counting that $200,000 that we heard about at lunchtime today, 4.88% overall. Yeah, it's not a great.
which, considering inflation and everything, is not that much money.
Absolutely not. To look at that increase in percentage year over year, which is not that different than what we saw going into FY25, to say that there's been mismanagement,
No. Outrageous.
It's outrageous. It's indefensible, and it to me comes from a place of refusing to actually dig into the numbers and look at where the money's actually going, and it's just saying something that sounds politically expedient. There's nothing to back it up. That's the soapbox, I guess.
It's going to be a super fun meeting.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Okay. It's keeping in mind that it's 8:38, and I know that Evan is exhausted.
Will's not though.
Will,
I'm ready and ready to go.
fresh as
lots,
daisy.
Oh, yeah.
lots of energy.
Right.
Yeah.
This
Right.
gentleman.
What time did you get to work today?
I actually took the day off and came in just to see the finance committee.
Stop it! No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
You did.
That is such.
I'm sure we'll pay for it somehow.
It's such an honor.
Oh, I missed all of you.
We missed you. He's my
Teed you
favorite
right up
tonight.
Thank
Teed
you.
you right up there.
Checks in the mail.
The chairwoman's award. Okay. Any other thoughts on this piece? Knowing that we will all see each other Tuesday in the big. Well, we'll see each other Saturday, but Tuesday in the big.
You can, I'd still be mad.
You feel ready?
Oh yeah. Never know.
I'm good.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's more to be talked about. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk a lot more Tuesday, but I do think that that's something worth looking at. It's not just the schools. And I don't know if that's something we incorporate into our conversations on Saturday with the different departments to understand what major cuts would look like there, like the schools had to do, or just
Starting pain.
yeah. I mean, just to talk with them to understand like what does that look like. But I'm not. It sucks no matter what way you put it. So, just trying to understand, so it's not just the schools having to deal with the.
Well, and I think even if we cut on the town side, we're also cutting level services.
Yeah.
Because there's not like
Right, there's no
pockets
major
of money
increases,
that are,
exactly.
you cut, people, then you're cutting services.
Right.
So,
And I think what your point is that maybe it is othering and or less tangible to say we're losing French.
Yeah.
Versus saying we're losing French, and now also we can only salt half of the roads every winter.
Yeah.
Don't vote for an override, right? Like I think that's where you're going.
That's yeah, is to make it a little more, less just about the schools and more about
everybody.
Yeah. Thank you for summing that up.
No, it's a fair point. Dan, please.
Yeah, just one quick thing that hasn't come up yet is I'm a little worried about the timeline. It feels like we're getting kind of late here, and I'm worried about the decision being kind of kicked down the road a few more times, and then finally putting something on the ballot at the last moment and having the minimum amount of time to actually get the word out, get the numbers out, and for something like this, it's when you don't have enough time to inform people, that has a big impact on people leaning towards saying no. So I think one thing that I want to bring up at the big meeting is to try to get this moving forward and get a decision made sooner rather than later.
I think that that is a perfect action item for us as a finance committee to ensure that the pressure is appropriately on the select board to make this decision so that that verbiage can be written and the narrative can be as palatable as possible.
I know there's already like a Yes Grafton
That's right. I saw that today.
group, yeah. So people are ground roots here,
That's right. I
Can't accuse us of not being politically involved.
right?
Those of us at this table.
Yeah.
For sure. And Dan, to your point, your very, very, very first point is I think that a lot of folks understand the necessity for this and for why it is a good thing to, at the very least, level fund the services that the folks in this town moved here for, pay taxes for, and love Grafton for, right? We wouldn't be sitting here at 8:43 if we didn't love our town. That being said, okay. Next item on the agenda is to choose the finance committee member to prepare the state of the town message.
And Mark's not here to volunteer me this time.
In fact,
I'll do it. I'll volunteer, Greg.
I knew that's where you were going. No.
No, I told Greg last year that I would do it, and I am a woman of my word, if nothing else. So I volunteer myself.
Second.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that a thing we do? Do we have to vote on that?
No.
I'm so gullible.
We
All right.
we'll vote on the final thing.
Perfect. I will volunteer myself, and I will get a draft out. Give me a couple weeks. And mostly because I know I'll need to be bugging Evan for details, and he's a little busy at the moment.
Yeah, I think we need to have it by the warrant review meeting. Because I think that's our last meeting before. Well, there's also the logistics meeting before town meeting.
I'll have it before that. That's too.
Yeah.
That would make me too nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got like a month. I can write a thing in a month.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Last thing on the agenda, meeting minutes for January 29th and February 25th.
I move we accept the meeting minutes of January 29th and February 25th as presented.
Second motion.
Beautiful. We have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes as presented. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. I will start with our Zoom attendees. Heather?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Skip?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Angelina?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
And Victoria also votes aye. That passes 7-0. 8-0. And with that, I believe we can adjourn this evening's meeting. And I will see you all, or most of you, bright and early, 8:30 on Saturday morning to go through the rest of the budget. Thank you, everyone, for joining in your participation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.